Welcome to another fascinating factual feast as we answer the 10 most asked questions to help you prepare for one of the world's most devastating, dangerous, and downright terrifying natural phenomena, earthquakes. While the violent and unexpected shaking of the earth is undoubtedly scary, it's important that we understand earthquakes and the science behind them in order to mitigate their effects and react better during a catastrophic seismic event. So, when the next big earthquake arrives, will you be ready? Starting with the most obvious question, what are earthquakes? Earthquakes are mostly caused by the movement of tectonic plates, which make up the Earth's crust. These large plates are constantly moving and shifting in response to forces within the Earth. When two plates come into contact, they can create a fault, which is a fracture or break in the Earth's crust. Earthquakes occur when the rocks on either side of a fault are under stress and suddenly shift or break. This sudden movement releases energy in the form of seismic waves, which travel through the Earth and cause the ground to shake. The point where rocks first break or shift is called the focus or hypocenter of the earthquake, and the point on the Earth's surface directly above it is called the epicenter. The Richter scale is based on measurements of the amplitude of seismic waves generated by an earthquake as recorded by seismometers. The scale ranges from 0 to 10, with each whole number representing a tenfold increase in the amplitude of the seismic waves. So an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.0 is 10 times more powerful than one with a magnitude of 6.0. It's worth noting that the Richter scale has some limitations when applied to larger, more complex earthquakes. Therefore, other scales and measurements, such as the moment magnitude scale, are also used to assess earthquake magnitude and damage in these cases. The largest earthquake ever recorded was the 1960 Valdivia earthquake, which occurred in southern Chile on May 22, 1960. The earthquake had a magnitude of 9.5 on the moment magnitude scale. This massive quake was so powerful that it caused widespread damage and destruction throughout southern Chile, as well as in parts of Argentina. The earthquake also generated a massive tsunami that caused further damage and loss of life in Chile, Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. The 1960 Valdivia earthquake remains one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. The deadliest earthquake ever recorded was the 1556 Shaanxi earthquake in China, which occurred on January 23, 1556. The earthquake had an estimated magnitude of 8.0 and struck in the Shaanxi province in central China. It is estimated to have caused the deaths of approximately 830,000 people, and it had a devastating impact on the region's infrastructure and economy. The high death toll was attributed to the earthquake's intensity, which caused buildings to collapse and triggered massive landslides that buried people and their homes. The number of earthquakes that occur in a year can vary significantly depending on the location and the magnitude threshold used to define an earthquake. On average, there are around 500,000 detectable earthquakes in a year, with around 100,000 of them being large enough to be felt by humans and only a small fraction causing damage or casualties. Most earthquakes occur along the edges of tectonic plates where two plates meet. These areas are known as plate boundaries. There are three types of plate boundaries. Divergent plate boundaries are where two plates are moving away from each other, such as at mid-ocean ridges. Convergent plate boundaries are where two plates are moving towards each other, such as where an oceanic plate is diving beneath a continental plate. Transform plate boundaries are where two plates are sliding past each other, such as the San Andreas Fault in California. The majority of earthquakes occur along the convergent and transform plate boundaries, particularly along the Pacific Ring of Fire. This is a horseshoe-shaped area around the Pacific Ocean that is home to many of the world's active volcanoes and where several tectonic plates meet. Other areas with frequent earthquakes include the Himalayas, Indonesia, and parts of the Mediterranean and Central Asia. Earthquakes can have a range of effects on the Earth, both immediate and long-term. Here are some of the most significant effects of earthquakes. The most immediate and obvious effect is ground shaking. which can cause damage to buildings, roads, bridges, and other infrastructures. The severity of the shaking depends on the magnitude of the earthquake, the distance from the epicenter, and the geology of the area. In coastal areas, large earthquakes can trigger tsunamis, which are giant waves that can cause significant damage and loss of life. Earthquakes can cause landslides, which can lead to additional damage and loss of life, especially in mountainous areas. Earthquakes can cause permanent changes in the Earth's surface, including the formation of new faults, changes in the course of rivers, and the creation of new mountains. Small earthquakes, those with magnitudes less than 3, typically last only a few seconds and are not usually felt by humans. Moderate earthquakes, those with magnitudes between 3 and 6, can last up to 30 seconds and can cause some damage to buildings and other structures. Large earthquakes, those with magnitudes greater than 6, can last for several minutes and can cause widespread damage and loss of life. Additionally, these earthquakes can be followed by a series of smaller earthquakes known as aftershocks. These aftershocks can continue for days, weeks, or even months after the initial earthquake, and they can cause further damage and further disrupt recovery efforts. Earthquake prediction is still a very challenging and complex task. Currently, there is no reliable way to predict earthquakes with complete accuracy. However, there are some methods and tools that scientists use to try to identify areas that are more likely to experience earthquakes. Seismographs are used to monitor the ground motion caused by earthquakes, and scientists can use this data to analyze the patterns of seismic activity in a given area. This can help identify areas that are more likely to experience earthquakes in the future. By analyzing the historical record of earthquakes in a given region, scientists can identify patterns and trends that can help predict future earthquakes. Some changes in the environment, such as changes in groundwater levels or the behavior of animals, may indicate that an earthquake is imminent. However, these changes are not always reliable predictors of earthquakes. If you are in an area where earthquakes are likely to occur, it's important to know how to protect yourself as best you can. Here are some steps you should take in the event of an earthquake. The most important thing to do during an earthquake is to drop to the ground, take cover under a sturdy table or desk, and hold on until the shaking stops. If you can't find a table or desk, crouch in an inside corner of the building and cover your head and neck with your arms. During an earthquake, windows and glass can shatter and cause injury. Move away from any windows or glass doors and take cover under a sturdy piece of furniture or in an inside corner of the building. If you are inside a building, stay there until the shaking stops. Avoid using elevators. Once the shaking stops, exit the building and move to a clear area away from the buildings, trees, and power lines. If you are outside during an earthquake, move to a clear area away from buildings, trees, and power lines. Stay there until the shaking stops. If you are driving during an earthquake, pull over to the side of the road as quickly and safely as possible. Stay in your vehicle until the shaking stops. Once the shaking stops, check yourself and others for injuries. If you are in a building, check for any damage or hazards, such as gas leaks or downed power lines. Follow any instructions or recommendations from local emergency services, such as evacuation orders or requests to shelter in place. Remember, earthquakes can be very dangerous, but taking these steps to protect yourself and stay safe can help reduce the risk of injury or damage. It's also important to have an emergency plan in place ahead of time so you know what to do in the event of an earthquake and are better prepared to help yourself and others around you.